The hum of distant drums mixes with the soft chatter of markets across Africa. Children laugh near dusty roads, while elders sit under acacia trees, listening to the radio. It feels peaceful, almost timeless. Yet beneath this calm surface, something powerful is beginning to stir. The year is approaching 2026, and Africa, once treated as a background actor in global affairs, is preparing to step forward as the writer of new world rules. The movement is called BRICS 2.0, and it could reshape everything the world thought it knew about power, trade, and justice. Over the last decade, the BRICS alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa has grown from a regional experiment into a global force. In 2025, under Brazil's leadership, the group expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. By 2026, new members from Africa are expected to join, turning this alliance into something far greater than an economic club. It is becoming a declaration of independence from the systems built by the West. For ordinary people, this story is not about numbers or policies. It is about survival. In Burkina Faso, a woman named Amina tends her farm while prices for fertilizer rise beyond reach. She hears on the radio that BRICS will soon launch a new development bank program for farmers across Africa. She wonders if this promise will reach her village, or if it will remain another headline that fades before sunrise. Her question is the same one millions of Africans quietly ask. Will BRICS 2.0 truly bring freedom, or just a new kind of control? If you believe that Africa deserves the right to define its own destiny, stay with me, because what begins as a financial story could soon become a moral one. BRICS 2.0 is not just about economics. It is about dignity, sovereignty, and a continent reclaiming its voice. But the question remains, who will really write the new global rules in 2026? By the time 2024 came to a close, the BRICS alliance had already started to transform. What began as a loose cooperation between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa was now turning into a broader global network. The addition of Egypt, Ethiopia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran in 2025 marked the beginning of something new. Indonesia and Nigeria were already being considered for future membership, and many other nations had applied to become official partners. Analysts called this moment the birth of BRICS 2.0, a symbol of a new world no longer shaped by the old powers of Washington and Brussels. At the center of this transformation stands Africa. For decades, the continent has been portrayed as a recipient of aid, a supplier of raw materials, or a theater for international competition. But BRICS 2.0 is changing that perception. For the first time, Africa is being invited to the table not as a dependent region, but as an equal partner in rewriting the rules of global governance. This shift is not only symbolic, but deeply strategic. Africa holds 60% of the world's arable land, vast deposits of critical minerals, and a population that will soon exceed 2 billion people. Whoever builds true partnerships in Africa will shape the global economy for the rest of the century. The announcement of the BRICS Multilateral Guarantee Fund in mid-2025 signaled a bold step in that direction. The fund was designed to unlock private investment in infrastructure, renewable energy, and technology across developing countries. Unlike the traditional IMF or World Bank programs, BRICS 2.0 promised flexibility, fewer political conditions, and a stronger voice for member nations. For leaders in countries such as Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Burkina Faso, this was more than a financial tool. It was a way to escape from the endless cycle of debt and dependency that had defined relations with Western lenders for decades. Nigeria's entry as a BRICS partner was seen as a turning point. With a population of over 200 million and one of Africa's largest economies, Nigeria has the potential to shape the future of this new alliance. Its leaders began to push for trade in local currencies, seeking to reduce the continent's reliance on the US dollar. The idea of a shared payment system among BRICS members began to take shape, promising greater financial sovereignty for developing nations. Yet, as enthusiasm grew, so did suspicion. Would these new mechanisms truly empower African economies, or would they simply shift control from Western capitals to Beijing and Moscow? Meanwhile, within the new development bank, discussions were underway about how to direct more capital toward African projects. Proposals emerged for massive infrastructure investments, including a transcontinental railway connecting mineral-rich regions in Burkina Faso and Mali to coastal ports in Ghana and Senegal. Such projects carried the potential to unite economies long divided by colonial borders. But they also risked sparking rivalry among African states competing for influence and funding. South Africa, the only African founding member of BRICS, suddenly found itself in a complex position. It had to balance its national interests with its new role as a continental mediator, while newer members like Egypt and Ethiopia demanded greater representation. The economic excitement surrounding BRICS 2.0 was matched by rising political tensions. Western nations, particularly the United States and members of the European Union, viewed this expansion as a challenge to their long-standing dominance in global institutions. Statements from Washington warned that closer ties between BRICS and Africa could lead to diplomatic friction or even new trade barriers. But for many African citizens, the calculus was simple. They were tired of promises that never delivered. If BRICS 2.0 could bring visible results, then it deserved a chance. At the heart of the movement lies a simple truth. Africa no longer wants to be spoken for. From the streets of Lagos to the farmlands of Ouagadougou, a new sentiment is taking hold. It is a belief that prosperity will not come from waiting for external rescue, but from building alternative alliances that respect local needs and values. Yet this awakening carries risks. The deeper Africa integrates with BRICS, the more it must navigate competing ambitions among its partners. China seeks raw materials and influence. Russia looks for military and diplomatic allies. India wants markets and political support. Each of these powers sees Africa as essential, but their interests do not always align with Africa's own vision for independence and fairness. The future of BRICS 2.0 will depend on whether Africa can turn this diversity of interests into strength. If managed wisely, it could lead to a more balanced global system where power is shared and respect is mutual. If mishandled, it could simply create another era of dependency under a different flag. As the world watches, the question lingers in the air. Will BRICS 2.0 become the foundation of a fairer world, or will it repeat the patterns of the past? And perhaps more importantly, can Africa remain united long enough to ensure that its voice is not only heard, but truly matters? As the calendar moves toward late 2025, the winds of change sweep across Africa. In Addis Ababa, the political capital of the continent, leaders gather for a historic summit that could redefine Africa's future within BRICS 2.0. Delegations from Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Burkina Faso fill the conference hall. The agenda is bold and unprecedented. African leaders are preparing to announce a unified security and economic framework tied to the expanding BRICS network. For decades, Africa's role in global affairs has been limited to reaction and compliance. Now it is becoming proactive, proposing systems of defense, investment, and development that could stand independent from Western control. The announcement takes the world by surprise. The newly proposed African Security Cooperation Pact will allow BRICS nations to assist in intelligence sharing, counter-terrorism training, and the creation of an African peacekeeping reserve force. The plan is presented as a solution to the continent's growing instability, particularly in the Sahel region where extremist groups continue to threaten civilians. Cameras capture the moment when a general from Burkina Faso steps to the microphone. He speaks quietly, but his words echo through the room. He describes villages burned by militants, children who have not seen schools in years, and farmers forced to abandon their land. His message is simple. Africa cannot depend forever on foreign interventions that serve others' interests. The continent must build its own shield. Across social media, reactions are immediate and passionate. Many Africans celebrate what they call the birth of sovereignty. Young voices from Kenya to Senegal post messages of pride and optimism. They see this new pact as a declaration that Africa will protect itself rather than rely on foreign armies. Yet not everyone is convinced. Civil society activists warn that without transparency, the pact could be abused by governments seeking to silence dissent. They fear that national leaders might use the banner of security to justify authoritarian measures. The tension between hope and caution grows stronger each day. In the West, alarm bells ring. News outlets in Washington, Paris, and London run headlines about a potential power shift that could weaken NATO's influence in Africa. Analysts on American television debate whether BRICS 2.0 represents a strategic challenge to U.S. interests. Some call it a natural evolution of a multipolar world, while others label it a dangerous alignment led by Beijing and Moscow. The United States Department of State issues a statement expressing concern about what it calls parallel structures that might undermine the United Nations and existing international frameworks. Behind the scenes, diplomats begin pressing African capitals to reconsider their commitments. Meanwhile, Russia and China seize the opportunity to deepen ties. Moscow offers military equipment and training to several African nations. Beijing pledges an additional $20 billion in infrastructure loans and technical assistance. India promotes a different vision, focusing on digital infrastructure and education partnerships. Within Africa, these offers generate mixed feelings. They promise growth and stability, yet many fear they could entangle nations in new forms of dependency. On the ground, ordinary people feel the effects of this political shift in small but significant ways. In Burkina Faso, villagers see new roads being built with BRICS funding. In Ethiopia, universities receive scholarships and technology support from Asian partners. In Nigeria, small businesses gain access to new credit lines that bypass traditional Western banks. But not all the outcomes are positive. Inflation begins to rise in some regions as the local economy struggles to adjust. Protests break out in certain cities, demanding accountability for how new funds are distributed. The African media landscape also changes. Independent journalists begin to question whether BRICS investments will bring real empowerment, or if the narrative of independence is being used to mask new alliances of power. A popular radio host in Ghana sums it up with one powerful question. If we change our partners, but not our principles, have we really become free? Amid these debates, the emotional tone across the continent remains electric. A new sense of identity and purpose begins to emerge. For the first time in modern history, African nations are speaking with a united voice about their collective destiny. But unity is fragile. Old rivalries and political ambitions threaten to fracture the new coalition. South Africa struggles to maintain leadership while newer members like Egypt and Nigeria demand a greater role. The coming year will test whether this dream of independence can survive the realities of geopolitics. The summit in Addis Ababa ends with applause, but also with uncertainty. As the leaders pose for photographs, the world sees smiles and handshakes. But behind those images lies a deeper question that no one dares to answer out loud. Can Africa truly protect itself without falling under the shadow of another global power? The cameras fade, the speeches end, but the question lingers in every African heart. The next move will decide whether BRICS 2.0 becomes the foundation of a new era or the beginning of another cycle of struggle and control. As 2026 begins, the echo of the Addis Ababa summit still lingers across Africa. In capitals from Lagos to Ouagadougou, citizens debate whether BRICS 2.0 represents liberation or another version of dependence. The new alliance has already begun to reshape daily life in ways that were once unthinkable. Roads, schools, and power plants funded by the BRICS Multilateral Guarantee Fund are appearing across the continent. For the first time, some African governments can finance large projects without waiting for approval from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. The optimism is real, yet beneath the surface lies a quiet tension that no one can ignore. In Burkina Faso, farmers like Amina Traore see both hope and uncertainty. She now receives affordable fertilizer and access to a new irrigation system financed through a BRICS loan. Her harvest has improved, but she still worries about the rising cost of goods in local markets. The sudden influx of foreign investment has created inflation in certain areas. Prices of everyday items climb faster than wages. Families that once welcomed the new programs now struggle to adjust to an economy that moves too quickly. Meanwhile, government officials celebrate these achievements on national television, portraying them as proof that BRICS 2.0 is working. In Nigeria, the situation is more politically charged. The government has launched a new development program called Trade and Sovereignty, which promotes local currency transactions between BRICS members. Supporters praise it as a step toward independence from the US dollar. Critics warn that the transition is too sudden and that the banking system is not ready. Small businesses benefit from easier credit lines offered by BRICS-backed banks. But some economists fear that long-term debt could accumulate under less transparent terms. The political opposition accuses the government of replacing Western creditors with Eastern ones. Protests emerge in major cities demanding clarity about how much control BRICS institutions hold over domestic policy. In South Africa, the public is divided. Some citizens see their country's leadership in BRICS as a source of pride, while others view it as an elite project that does not address unemployment and inequality. Civil society groups begin to push for parliamentary oversight of BRICS projects. They argue that African nations should learn from the past and ensure that no foreign alliance, no matter how promising, is allowed to dominate national priorities. Despite these calls for caution, government leaders remain confident that the BRICS partnership will secure Africa's future. Across the Sahel, the new BRICS Security Cooperation Pact begins to show its influence. Joint training programs between African and BRICS military personnel start in several regions. Villagers in border towns report fewer attacks by militant groups, and for the first time in years, some children return to school. Yet not all results are positive. Human rights organizations raise alarms that some governments are using new security powers to suppress dissent. In one televised report, an activist in Mali claims that the state is labeling protest groups as threats to regional stability under the new BRICS framework. The line between security and control is becoming blurred. In Western capitals, the shift is seen with growing anxiety. European diplomats quietly admit that they underestimated how quickly BRICS would gain traction across Africa. The United States begins to revise its aid strategy, offering new trade incentives and security assistance to prevent a total loss of influence. American officials publicly stress that their concern is about transparency and democracy, but privately, they acknowledge that economic competition is the real driver. Some analysts warn that a geopolitical fault line is emerging across Africa, dividing nations into those aligned with BRICS and those still loyal to Western partnerships. The consequences are not only political, but emotional. For millions of Africans, BRICS 2.0 has become a symbol of dignity and defiance. People talk about it in markets, schools, and churches. For the first time in generations, there is a sense that Africa might finally chart its own course. Yet beneath the hope lies a fear that history could repeat itself. Every alliance comes with expectations, and every promise comes with a price. The question that echoes across the continent is simple, yet profound. Can Africa hold on to its unity and independence as new powers compete for its future? As night falls over the bustling streets of Nairobi and Lagos, the same question plays on people's minds. The BRICS 2.0 revolution has begun, but no one knows how long the optimism will last. If Africa can maintain transparency and integrity, it might finally turn promise into progress. If not, the dream could fade into another cycle of control, disguised as cooperation. The next move will determine whether this moment becomes a true rebirth or just another chapter in a long struggle for self-determination. In Washington, the rise of BRICS 2.0 is no longer viewed as a distant issue, but as a direct challenge to the established order. American policymakers are divided between those who see engagement as the best path forward and those who call for containment. In several congressional hearings, experts warn that if the United States ignores the growing influence of BRICS across Africa, it could lose not just markets, but long-term partnerships that took decades to build. Others argue that BRICS will eventually collapse under its own contradictions, claiming that its members are too diverse to maintain unity. The U.S. administration begins to craft a new strategy focused on competing through cooperation. Economic advisors propose a renewed investment framework that prioritizes African-led development rather than conditional loans. The State Department launches a diplomatic campaign across the continent, promising partnerships based on transparency and respect. Yet these promises sound familiar to many African leaders who remember decades of unmet commitments. While Washington talks of partnership, BRICS continues to deliver visible results on the ground through roads, ports, and renewable energy projects that ordinary people can see and touch. Across the Atlantic, European governments struggle to adapt. France, once a dominant power in parts of West Africa, faces protests and declining influence. The European Union debates whether to approach BRICS as a competitor or as a potential collaborator in solving global crises such as climate change and migration. Meanwhile, China and Russia expand their reach through trade and military cooperation, while India focuses on technology and education initiatives. Brazil positions itself as the bridge between the global South and the West, emphasizing dialogue rather than confrontation. Global institutions also feel the impact. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank begin internal reforms aimed at giving developing nations a stronger voice. In the United Nations, African countries push for greater representation and voting power, arguing that a multipolar world must reflect the realities of modern demographics and economies. By late 2026, one fact is undeniable. The balance of global power is shifting, and Africa is no longer on the sidelines. For the United States and its allies, the question is not whether to respond, but how. Can they respect Africa's sovereignty while still protecting their own interests? Or will they once again try to control the outcome of a story that is no longer theirs to write? As 2026 unfolds, the story of BRICS 2.0 becomes more than a political movement. It is now a mirror reflecting the choices that will define Africa's destiny. Across the continent, the results of this new alliance are mixed. Some nations experience an economic revival as trade expands and infrastructure improves. Others face growing social tension as leaders struggle to balance national priorities with international expectations. The world watches closely, uncertain whether this is the rise of a new global balance or the beginning of another contest for influence. In the cities, conversations about sovereignty and justice fill coffee shops and radio stations. Ordinary people sense that something historic is happening. They speak about fairness, opportunity, and dignity. In the rural heartlands, however, the reality is more complex. Farmers still wait for promised funds. Teachers still struggle with outdated materials. Families wonder if their children will see real change, or just another round of grand speeches and empty promises. The mood across Africa is one of cautious hope, mixed with the painful memory of past disappointments. Internationally, the BRICS alliance continues to gain strength. Its financial institutions are lending more than ever before. Member countries speak of fairness and equality in global trade. Yet critics warn that without strong internal accountability, this movement could become another system that benefits a few at the expense of many. The fear of dependency, whether on East or West, remains deeply rooted in African consciousness. The question now facing every African leader and citizen is clear. Can Africa transform this moment into genuine empowerment, or will it fall back into the traps of history? The choices made in the next few years will decide not only the continent's economic future, but its moral identity. If this story makes you pause, reflect. What kind of future do you want for Africa and for the world? Do you believe that fairness and justice can truly coexist with power and ambition? Your thoughts matter because silence allows history to repeat itself. May Africa rise with wisdom, not pride. May its leaders remember the people whose dreams gave birth to this movement. And may we all understand that the rewriting of global rules will mean nothing if it does not also rewrite the meaning of humanity itself.